Right, let's see if that's working. Okay, good, it's working. I'm going to... Sorry about that, guys. There's something wrong with the streaming. I'm using this new link, and I'm going to make sure people know to go to this link instead. And I'll be able to answer some questions. Right. Right. Right, okay, I'm just going to wait for some questions now. If it's lagging, I may need to go somewhere else. I have to try a better connection. Let's see. I'm not sure if I can go actually. Right, which Socionics types correlate the most with the Enneagram type 3 and 4 in your opinion, and why? Oh, good, it's working. Okay, good. Okay, so, well, the main thing about Enneagram 3, it's focused very much on achievement. It's motivated by the sin of pride. I would say, when it comes to type 3 in an Enneagram, that would probably correlate the most with the Gamma Energizers, I would say. The emphasis on personal achievement being the most important thing for them. Whereas when it comes to 4, well, motivated by the sin of envy, there's a need for type 4s to be, or to hold themselves being particularly special, or having some sort of specific narrative, or something of greater importance that makes them unique. In that regard, I would say that, well, I imagine that IEIs may be quite common for type 4s in an Enneagram. Especially type 4 wing 5 would be very common for an IEI. Other types maybe type 4. Could see EIEs becoming type 4, I would say. So yeah, those are the types I think are most likely to correlate with Enneagram type 3 and 4. Not to say that I'm any sort of expert in Enneagram, I'm certainly not. Yeah, that's what I think. Okay, Alicia Harris says, do you think conflicted types can find ways of relating with each other over time and creating a positive relationship? I think that they can. I think it's a question of, understanding that there are differences, that you have different values, different ways of approaching the world. It may not be the most intuitive way of understanding each other, maybe made barriers to that understanding. But I think that, at least with time and with practice, if you are committed to actually getting on with each other, if you have to, say if you're brother and sister, right? You need to work things out between each other. You need to find coping mechanisms. You need to find, you don't want to spend all your time around each other. So I think there are ways you can find that you can bridge these gaps, but it's definitely going to be one of the more difficult examples. It's just a question of really, talking things through, finding out what compromise you're willing to make for each other and making it happen. Now, can it be a positive relationship? Well, it's important to keep in mind that with conflictors, although they're not bringing the information to the table in the way which is most appreciated by each type, they nevertheless have such a difference in their strengths and weaknesses that they do actually have a lot which they could help each other with. The same way that a dual could. The problem is that the values are wrong, so they do it in a way which actually inflames differences and inflames weaknesses rather than actually improves a situation. So it's tricky. If conflictors can actually work on their id block more, so their demonstrative function, that could be a good way of working around the issue or bridging the gap. But it's difficult. counterintuitive to each type. I think with that knowledge of socionics, for instance, I think that could be achieved. I wouldn't want to say it can't be achieved. As Shorjan says, I think they'll learn to avoid certain topics. I think it's certain ways of framing topics, certain ways of putting pressure in terms of one's values on others. Okay, another question from Shorjan. What's the best way of finding your type? Well, there are two ways. There's the hard way, and then there's the easier way. The easier way is by either taking a good test, which is hard to find, so that's probably not a very easy way in and of itself. Probably the easiest way is to have a diagnostic interview. Something I offer. I do diagnostic interviews, basically a 1 hour interview, and then I talk to the person for an hour, and I help them to work out what type they are. So that's a way which a lot of people have found useful and easy to do. Well, in a 1 hour engaging conversation, it's not going to be incredibly easy. It's quite a challenging conversation at times, but it's definitely a way by which after an hour you've got a very good chance of having a good idea what your type is. Another way you can find out your type is the harder way, and that's close in personal introspection, observation of your own behaviors, and reading up on the theory enough to the point where you're confident that whatever observations you make of yourself, you can accurately and reliably assign that to a type. So that's difficult. You need a lot of knowledge and you need a lot of self-awareness, neither of which are easy to come by, and neither of which many people actually have. But yeah, those are probably the two best ways of doing it. Lynn asks, I don't know if you covered this already, but I was wondering if you could please elaborate on the hidden agenda of each type. So, the hidden agenda is another name given to the mobilizing function. It's the sixth function in Model A. The idea of Model A being that, well, each category or kind of information, each information metabolism element, is assigned to a function, thereby giving a certain approach which the type takes towards it. Good example, leading function being the main program, the way in which a type approaches everything in the world. So the main driving force or driving motivator. When it comes to the mobilizing function, this is going to be more like a secondary motivation, like an aspiration specifically. It's something which is weak but valued. It's something which a type asserts and tries to do but may slip up because it's still a weak area. So, when it comes to the sixth function, which is in the super id block, so the area of weak valued information, you have this sort of, well, it's an area you can slip up. It's an area which you want to do well and you want to try very hard in it, but there's always the possibility of you failing, and it can be quite embarrassing. So when it comes to each type, I think the best way to do this is to look at, well, let's do it 8 different kinds of type, let's say, because for each hidden agenda as well, each mobilizing function, that's shared by 2 types. So there are 8 different ways you can have this, one for each information metabolism element. So first of all, let's start with mine. So ILE, but also SLE, which has extroverted ethics as the mobilizing function. That's going to be that focus on trying to, trying to increase the emotional reactions in other people. ILEs and SLEs want to try to provoke reactions, you could say. They want to often appeal to the crowds of the people around them. And there are certain difficulties there because they're not very good at actually maintaining their close relationships with people. They may go over the line with particular people's sensitivities. So lots of difficulties when it comes to extroverted ethics in the mobilizing function. That's one example. When it comes to introverted logic as a mobilizing function, so this is what you find with IEIs and SEIs, there's going to be that attempt to try to create some sort of structural understanding. SEIs and IEIs want to show that they understand things, they understand the truth, how things all fit together. They may be quite stubborn in this way in which things fit together. But they won't be very good at actually taking in and processing new factual information. You see, the mobilizing function is always linked to the vulnerable function. So on one side, you're over-asserting something, and the other side, you're not paying any attention to its inverse at all. So for IEIs, it's being very stubborn and sticking to its structure, to its worldview, its set understanding, and not updating it with new factual data. That'll be the IEI-SEI, introverted logic. When you get to extroverted logic, on the other hand, extroverted logic, there'll be IEEs, SEEs. These are types who want to demonstrate their competence, how well they're doing things. They want to take in new data, make things work better, constantly trying to update and improve. They're not going to be so good at it, though, because of their lack of introverted logic, they'll be reduced to essentially pure opportunism, pure pragmatism, with no ability to actually formulate certain rules or ways in which things work in general. Instead, each situation or each sort of example, they'll find a way of working best, but won't actually say the actual general principles for how it should work. So that'll be the mobilizing function for IEs, SEs, extroverted logic. When it comes to introverted ethics as a mobilizing function, well, this is what we find with ILIs and SLIs. And for them, they have this need to form close relationships, to find an intimate relationship, but they don't have the ability to actually appeal broadly to other people, to actually make themselves more outgoing or charismatic. Instead, you have a situation where they are slow to form attachments to people, and if they are actually betrayed in those attachments, they may find it very difficult to make new friends. So they're quite SLIs and ILIs are types who are going to have very few friendships, and they won't be very good at forming new friendships or going out and socializing to get more people on board, to make more social contacts. So that's all the that's for ethics and logic, and now I get to sensation and intuition as mobilizing functions. So extroverted intuition is a mobilizing function. You see this with LSEs and ESEs. Now these are types which are going to be, they're basically going to have a difficulty with things being inevitable. They don't have any introverted intuition. They won't accept the idea that things will happen inevitably. That you can narrow down the range of what's possible towards certain set outcomes. They'll often take the view that if they work hard enough at something, anything is possible, as long as they work hard enough at it to make it happen. So, when it comes to LSEs and ESEs, these are types where, if they're set by a problem, they'll try to prepare for every single possibility they can think of, and yet basically go into over-preparation. They try to cover all possibilities, without being able to decide what is actually more likely to happen, what is definitely not going to happen. So that'll be a difficulty with LSEs and ESEs. It's only trying to view all eventualities rather than the one or two things which will happen. Next we get to LSI, which has introverted intuition as a mobilizing function, and ESI as well. So this is going to be the opposite. These are types which are so focused on one particular outcome, whose mobilizing function is about trying to find a sense of meaning and purpose in their life, a sense of how things are going to turn out in the long run. They're going to lack the ability to see outside of that long-term outcome. They're going to be unwilling to consider alternative points of view. So once they've taken quite some time to think out their plan or their purpose, they'll set down along that path without turning back. It'll be very hard to get them to change their mind. So that'll be introverted intuition and mobilizing function. Then we get to sensation. So, well, introverted sensation, you see these are types like the LII and EII. There'll be very much a focus on the calm and the pleasantness of a physical environment. Things being safe, things being stable and, enjoyable or simply smooth flowing. There's going to be avoidance of conflict-oriented scenarios, of too much strain. There may be a hypersensitivity towards the environment being too harsh, and they're trying to make it as soft and calm as possible. A certain delicateness may come from this. or a certain fastidiousness over the details of the environment. And you may find this with LIIs and EIIs. They won't be very good at actually challenging any sort of unwanted things in their physical environment. For them, it's more about trying to maintain the present environment to keep it safe from any potential harm, because they won't be able to handle any big challenge, any tough situation which involves immediate action in the present. Links to their vulnerable function of extroverted sensation. Finally, we get to types which are extroverted sensation mobilizing. So these are the LIEs and EIEs. These types want to see themselves as tough, as quite strong. They have a certain impatience, a certain impetuousness, which they'll try to assert at certain points. They'll cycle between overaction and then underaction, because they'll be hesitating, not sure how to act next. So you get that sort of unstable energy level with LIEs and EIEs. They assert themselves into the environment and then they hesitate. They're not sure how to act next, what the next thing to do is. They're not at their element in the present time, in the current moment, but they want to be. And due to their lack of introverted sensation, well, it's been very hard to relax around these types. They got that intensity, but no ability to actually allow people to actually chill out around them. And they don't really understand the idea of sort of just chilling out, just making things calm and easygoing, organically flowing. So yeah, those are the hidden agendas for each type. I find it. I differ from someone like Sergei Ganin, that I don't think you can just say they have a one thing which they like to love, to be loved, to be perfect, to be comfortable. It's not as simple as that. It's something which they assert, which they try to do, which doesn't work out always. Often because they're not paying any attention to the inverse of that particular thing, which should be supporting it. Like, to be truly assertive, to be truly powerful, you do need to take care of your physical day-to-day needs. To be truly, to have truly strong friendships, you do need to actually go out and actually make friends in the first place. To be, to have a really good plan in the long run that won't turn out to go wrong, you need to consider all the different possibilities, but at the same time to actually maximize your potential and actually look at all these different possibilities. Understanding, you do need to understand also what things are actually not going to happen, what things you can actually not spend all your time on because they're certainly not going to happen. So that's the dynamic of the mobilizing function. Okay, retro gamer 71. Is there a sequential temporal unfolding of your own sociotype that is observable experience of cognitive or moments in information processing? I'll read that again. Is there sequential... Oh, sorry everyone, my sister's calling. I'm busy! I'm busy! Is there a sequential temporal unfolding of your own sociotype that is observable experience of cognitive or moments in information processing? I'm not sure what to make of that sentence, Retro Gamer 71. Could you clarify to me? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Okay, I'll turn to your question later. I'm going to answer some more questions first. Chris Schmidt, can you name some jobs that personify the quadras quite well? For quadras? Well, you can say for alpha... Well, I'm going to have to go to stereotypes in this case. But, okay, some stereotypes for each quadra. You can imagine alpha researchers being oriented towards theory-based sciences, not empirical sciences, you could say. Or distinction? Well, empirical sciences are based on actual observations, doing real-time experiments. The theoretical side, more, well, hypothesizing, speculating, thought experiments. So, for instance, say in Big Bang Theory, the people who focus more on sort of the theoretical physics rather than the experimental physics, they do theoretical cosmology. You can also imagine alpha researchers going to things like philosophy, mathematics, or the pure mathematics rather than applied mathematics. It's even going into personality type theories. So yeah, this sort of academic role you can see as being sort of like a stereotype for LIIs and ILEs. Very professorial, you might say. As for SEIs, ESEs, imagine more nurturing roles, maybe a physiotherapist, or a nurse, or a matron, or even something that's more entertainment oriented. So entertainers, TV show hosts, people just like to appear in public and also just to, cheer people up. I think those different jobs work quite well for alpha. When it comes to betas, the stereotypes that come to mind are, well, imagine, at least for beta humanitarians, the idea of sharing important messages is important. So you can imagine things like musicians, well, because alpha's also musicians to be fair, but like the musicians that focus on very eclectic tastes, all targeted towards some sort of driving message. Think of types of Lady Gaga and Freddie Mercury, David Bowie. Yeah, you can also see he's going into things like politics, certain kinds of art, fashion, whatever strikes a chord with people. That sends off a certain sort of message. Writers as well. There's so many different jobs you can think of there. When it comes to beta pragmatists, so LSIs and SLEs, well, you can think of things like the military is a good stereotype. Imagine administration, becoming a bouncer, working in security, law enforcement. It's even working in sides of business as well, property development, something that's quite concrete. Yeah, going in. Yes, I joined the military is a good one. Looking at IEIs as well, less so for EIEs, but IEIs you can see some sort of role in religion or faith. EIEs as well, becoming like a preacher. So yeah, those are all roles I think, or jobs one can typically attach to betas in a sort of stereotype sort of way. Gammas, well, SEs and ESIs, you can imagine roles where you are working quite closely with people. You have to be able to quickly size other people up. So imagine roles like negotiators, networkers, especially for SEs, ESIs, roles where it's more than a one-on-one. Imagine like a role such as a teacher. I've heard of ESIs being judges. Been quite good at that. ESIs can often be police officers as well, law enforcement. And SEs may also want to go into business, become entrepreneurs. When it comes to LIEs and ILIs, well, LIEs more entrepreneurial again, more like the SE in that respect. Want to start up their own business, manage their affairs themselves. ILIs can be more academic again, more towards a more analytical field. Work in, say, research. So research analysts may be quite common for ILIs, also LIIs back in alpha. So yeah, that's to say about gamma. Comes to delta, you can imagine the sort of stereotypes in delta, sort of the more of a nurturing field, but more about giving practical advice compared to alpha. LSEs can imagine becoming sort of medical doctors or engineers, mechanics, doing things which involve actually working directly with the thing they're trying to work on. Imagine working in pharmacies as well, needing a very sort of precise hand, especially SLIs. Again, LSIs and beta can also do that. Also, imagine LSEs also do quite well in the military, a bit like the betas, but they're not so attracted towards the hierarchical aspect. It's more about just They tend to show good leadership and very good at acting in the moment. LSEs. EIIs and IEs. Well, the major thing about them for a career is that they are not constricted. They have a sort of boundaryless career, you could say. It's very much a delta humanitarian approach. So I imagine now EIEs being all sorts of things: journalists, people who travel around the world trying to find out different perspectives. They become lots of writers. I can imagine being EIIs or IEs, maybe perhaps lesser extent IEs. Avid television show hosts are IEs. EIIs may also go towards the arts again, a bit like the betas, but I found writing, especially delving into person's personal perspectives, something I see a lot with Delta humanitarians. I think of Dostoevsky as an example. Yeah, those are sort of jobs which I would stereotypically give to each type, and there's no reason why someone who's of a different type would be any of these jobs, or maybe other jobs. It's just things like which come to mind at the moment. I mean, it's definitely something which deals with stereotypes rather than describes the full reality of the types and what roles they end up in. Queen Bee says, I thought it was interesting how you brought up the possibility that the information elements are derived from metaphysical concepts. My greatest dream is to attend the Socionics New York City meeting. I may be able to once I live in the dorm. Yes, definitely come to the New York City meeting. I'm not sure where the next one is. They're sort of irregular, but yeah, I definitely recommend turning up to one of them, especially as they're so rare. And yes, they are derived from metaphysical concepts. It's because that's the idea. It strikes at information itself. It should be something fundamental, a fundamental way of viewing the world, rather than simply something you act out in behaviour. Right. Shurjan says, you said people can't relax around EIE and LIE due to introvert sensation vulnerable. However, isn't introvert intuition the ability to create internal calm within oneself and others? No, I wouldn't say so. The thing about intuition, it describes, well, potential states, not actual states. So, when you think of calmness, what does calmness describes an actual state, what's going on around us, a physical reality, and it describes the nature of physical reality being unmoving, or being still, and if it does move, it's soft and flowing, organic and natural, no abruptness. So it's very much a description of introverted sensation, not introverted intuition. Introverted intuition, instead, will be talking about these potential states. So finding something which is of greatest meaning or purpose, something which leads to a very clear outcome, an outcome of great significance. So now those with introverted intuition in the creative aren't going to become more calm as a result. They may be able to attach more meaning and significance to the things they're working on, but that just makes them more purposeful. It doesn't make them any more calm or sort of relaxed. Right, what else is there? Let's see. Sunsoak. What is the current status of validating socionics as a legitimate social science? What needs to be done? The current status is that there's a long way off before we're able to make it into a legitimate social science. The main issue is this. There aren't that many people in the academic community who know about socionics. Very few. Well, I'd probably number them being around 10 maximum, at least in the West. There are some people in the East, Eastern Europe, are interested in socionics, but I haven't seen any of them actually write something that goes into a peer-reviewed scientific journal. And that's the thing, you need enough people to be invested in this socionics and this theory, actually conduct some real experiments, some good thorough experiments that would get peer review, that could actually get over the bar to get into those journals. No one's doing that at the moment. So that's what needs to be done. You need people to be, people in university, as we're speaking to right now. Anyone in university who's listening, if you can, if your subject which you're studying at university is linked up in any way to socionics, I say try and get your dissertation written in socionics. Try to contribute to the scientific literature. If you can do that, you enable people later, people working in psychology, for instance, working in the experimental fields of psychology, to actually conduct an experiment, and to put together a literature review for that. So if you have contributed to literature, you enable that process, the next step, which is testing what's appearing in the literature. Then we'll actually have some experiments, which can then go into scientific journals, which will then contribute even more to the literature. We'll then start the process of making this more legitimate as a social science, assuming, of course, that the basic theories and tenets of socionics aren't torn apart by the empirical investigation, which, if it happens, it happens. That's how it is. Queen Beast. And I'm guessing that internal calmness, Shorja mentioned, is usually only created within others when extroverted ethics is in the ego block. When introverted intuition is paired with TE, extrovert logic, however, there is less focus on wanting to place others at ease. Well, I would say that's partially correct. That if you don't even have extroverted ethics in the leading position, you're going to be even less focused on how people are reacting to you. And you may find that EIEs are more able to, despite still being quite impatient, quite restless and impetuous, they may still put forward this sort of more warm manner. They focus more on their presentation, the way that LIEs may find more difficulty doing, because they want to be as productive as possible. They won't want to stop and relax at any particular point. EIEs they'll still have a sort of trouble relaxing and winding down, but they're not necessarily going to be so productive and overactive all the time. And their emotionality may require them to keep people happy around them. So yes, I would say there is some truth to that. Nevertheless, I find even with EIEs, their emotionality is rarely soft and calming. It's usually more intense, more high energy, more mercurial as well. Those are all the questions so far. Is it just my yeah, I think that's all the questions at the moment. I think something which Alicia said. If you run out of questions at any point, you should describe dualization. Well, that's an interesting one. I would say that dualization, well, it depends what you mean by dualization, Alicia. Do you mean the dualization within the person? Say when they start to develop their super id to the point where it's no longer an issue. I find this sort of dualization, one could say it's sort of like an ideal one can strive towards, a self-dualization. Or are you talking more about the dualization which is more common, where people of two different types, duals specifically, are able to meet each other and actually start to help each other when with their super id blocks? For me, the former, I said it's an ideal to strive towards. It's the idea where you look at your difficulties, the things which you have difficulty in, which you value, super block, your suggestive function specifically, and also your mobilizing function, but to a lesser degree, and you try to work on developing those. And I guess exposing yourself to enough experiences of familiarity that in familiar situations you can do those things well enough. You can manage in those areas. I guess one could call that a self-dualization. As when you think about dualization in the more common sense, where it's two different types who are duals, it's the idea that your strengths, the things which you bring to the world, are good supports for the person who has that as their super id, and vice versa. They'll be able to help you, you'll be able to help them. There's that mutual symmetrical relationship. And there's this idea, at least from Aristotle, that not Aristotle, from Plato, that love is admiration, that a really good relationship is one where the other person has things which you don't have, and you benefit from each other's company. So you can imagine a sort of mutual benefiting going on in dualization. Now, I wouldn't say that stops a type from being a type. I don't think it makes someone no longer subscribe to the law of psychological asymmetry. It doesn't suddenly eradicate your weaknesses. I think what it does do is it allows someone else to sort of step into to handle things you can't handle, and vice versa. And it also allows you to start to learn certain techniques or ways of doing these things in familiar situations. That exposure can lead to personal development on each side. Take, for instance, an ILE or an SEI, and the ILE can start, paying more attention to the food they eat, starting to cook more. They may end up going to bed earlier because they're being advised to by the SEI. And the SEI may be exposed to new possibilities, new ways of viewing the world, new ideas they'd never even thought about. And they may even, as a result, they may start developing new interests, which is something the SEI don't often tend to do on their own. So, yeah, that's why I would think of the regular kind of dualization. Any other questions? I want to return to Retrogamer's question. I want to see if I can first of all understand what's being said to me, so I can answer it properly. Is there a sequential temporal unfolding, okay, of your own sociotype? Okay, I think I know what you mean, Retrogamer. So, do you mean that, at least in my own development, say for ILE, I noticed an unfolding chain in how I use different information elements? Say that when I was youngest, I used extrovert intuition the most, and then started to use more introverted logic, and then more extroverted ethics and introverted sensation. I think that's what you mean. I know that's an idea which is put forward in, I know sort of the Jungian cognitive function people. They often talk about this sort of development over time from the dominant to the auxiliary through to tertiary, with the inferior only coming across the Middle Ages. Well, I would say there is some truth to that. I would say that when I was very young, I think what was always most obvious was my extroverted intuition, and also my extroverted logic, so my leading and demonstrative function. I think I became more... I'm not entirely sure, but I would say that I would have become more structural and categorical, more overtly so, throughout childhood, maybe. I'm not sure. What I do know is that my extroverted ethics was not very good until I was at university. I think I became a lot more able to appeal to others, to be more popular when I was sort of post-adolescent. And introverted sensation I still have trouble with. Still have big trouble with. I still have trouble with extroverted ethics sometimes as well, but less often now. When I say my introverted sensation, it's something I've been helped out with a lot more recently since I got into my relationship with an SEI. So I think I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if that's something which you would see for all types. I have no evidence to suggest it's something which is common to all types, but at least for me, I have seen that sort of development over time. Right, some more questions. Chris Schmidt. Are beta NFs more likely to be less expressive than alpha SFs? And does the extroverted ethics in beta NFs come off in more subtle ways? Well, I found both to be expressive, but in different ways. So, for alphas, there's emphasis on positive emotionality. It's also important to keep in mind that as the alpha SF sensory ethical types, it can be a bit more physical in their emotional expression. There'll be more physical movement, at least something which I've seen. I find with beta and Fs, that's less the case. They can be more, as you say, subtle. at least in the physicality. Because it's obvious they'll be using physicality. However, the expressions given off will differ as well. So beta and Fs, they'll often be more intense, these emotional expressions. Less physical, but more, but the timbre of emotion, the quality of emotion will be darker, you could say. And they'll be more likely to use more negative emotions. Like anger, for instance, will be more intense. Whereas alphas were trying to keep the mood more positive and light-hearted. They may still lose their temper, of course, and get angry and all the rest, but there's less of an emphasis on that in their desired expressions. Alicia says, how about contrasting with semi-dualization? Ah, okay. So, yeah, so you have a duality relation, which in duals, say SEI, ILE. It's the idea where they share the same values, but they're complete opposites in their strengths and weaknesses. Now, semi-duality is meant to be a similar relationship, but sort of like halfway there. So the main thing about this is that with semi-duals, the leading function and suggestive function swap around. They match up, basically. So with semi-duality, you are getting the main thing which you need from the other person. But the creative function and the mobilizing function, they do not match up. As a result, the way each type gives you the thing which you need is not particularly comfortable. It's not the way in which you desire or need it. Well, it's the way they give you what you need, but not in the way you want, you could say. Semi-duality. Good examples, the ILE and SLI. Well, the ILE will like that sort of more comfortable day-to-day details. They'll like the idea of being able to relax in the day-to-day, for instance. They like more pleasurable day-to-day experiences. But the SLI, they'll give those details. They'll give it a more calming, relaxing atmosphere, but they won't lend much to the emotional content. They won't focus so much on the fun of it, on the enjoyment of it, and more on the practical utility of it, more on the convenience of it. And so the ILE is not going to get quite the right kind of fun which they need, and vice versa. The SLI won't be getting the relationship quality which they need. They won't get the sense of close intimacy from an ILE which they can get from an IEE. But they will be getting lots of interesting ideas and possibilities, new ways of looking at things, which is the main thing which they need. So semi-duality is not quite as comfortable as duality, you can say. I've seen described elsewhere that semi-duality is like a moth to the flame. The idea is that you get too close, you get a bit burned. But I haven't really seen that. I haven't seen that phenomenon happen so much, and I wouldn't grant it that much credence. Any other questions? Retrograde 21. Functions can be different modes of development. Yeah, that's sort of what that's what I mean. I feel that my leading function was always pretty much there, same with my demonstrator function. My creative function, I think, was also there. It was implicit in my leading function anyway. Whereas I find when it comes to my mobilizing function, that is something which I do think I've developed over time. I've gotten better at over time. And my suggestive function, I'm still not on top of. I think it would be hard for me to get on top of it in general. So yeah, I think, and that's implicit with dimensionality, this thing which Bukolov came up with, the idea that the different functions exist at different layers of capability. That the four-dimensional functions, things which you can do, which are most natural and apparent to you, you can apply it well in any situation. Which is an ILE would use extrovert intuition or extrovert logic well in any situation. However, when it comes to something like extroverted ethics, they may learn certain rules, some familiar ways of doing it in situations they're used to, but when it comes to a new situation, suddenly it will freeze up and it won't be done nearly as well as a strong function. It's still a weak function. This idea that they be bold, that they do it with confidence, but not with capability. I think that's very much true for the extroverted ethics for an ILE. Well, it goes back to what I was saying about the mobilizing function before. The role function also applies this way, but it's less overweening, it's less overly arrogant because you don't really value it in the first place. to be attempted in familiar situations, but again, will sort of freeze up in unfamiliar situations. When it comes to the very weakest ones, what are known as one-dimensional, they don't even have a sense of situation, so they don't even have a sense of normativity, the idea that you actually put together certain rules and familiar situations for using it. There's almost always a place of uncertainty for the person trying to use it, a place where there's little confidence. Green Beast, are you implying that it is possible to self-dualize? Not, I see it as an ideal. I don't think it's a naturally achievable reality. I think if it could be, it'd be incredibly difficult. I mean, there's also a question of what exactly do you mean by self-dualize? Do you mean that you're able to build up enough of a bank of familiar situations that you're able to perform very well on all your two-dimensional information elements in pretty much any situation? Maybe that would take a lot of work. For one-dimensional, even more work. I'm not sure how that would be achieved. Or are you saying that you've reached a point where your strength in all of them is completely equal? You're as good as extrovert intuition as you are an extrovert is introverted sensation. If you're a naive, for instance, or a naive, I think that's even less likely to be. I think that's even harder to believe. So no, I'm not implying it's necessarily possible, or I would say it's likely implausible. I think in the former definition that I gave, it's implausible but still possible, maybe. Sunso, what do you think of Victor Galenko? Clever guy, one of the main, almost well-known socionists. I have doubts as to his newer ideas of Model G. I haven't seen that much utility towards his ideas. I feel it's more of a reinvention of the wheel, and I wonder as to why he decided to create Model G, especially given that we already know what energy metabolism is. It's metabolism which is digesting my dinner right now, converting that into energy. So I don't see a good reason to even have an energy metabolism idea for socionics. It's meant to be information metabolism. When I look at the actual Model G, I find that in many places it seems internally contradictory. It replaces certain names with other names in other places. It almost seems deliberately confusing. I just don't see its utility. People haven't been able to show me its utility yet. I would like to maybe see its utility if someone's able to sit down and show it to me, because I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I think he's been very helpful in contributing to socionics, at least in the earlier days. Some of his ideas I don't think are as useful as others. I think, well, I used to think his temperaments idea was quite a good one, but then, like linear assertive, flexible maneuvering, but over time I found it become less useful as time's gone by. I think because, especially when it comes to this focus on the physical attributes and sort of energy levels, it becomes a bit harder to actually identify behaviours, more so harder than one would imagine from reading these descriptions. And looking at, for instance, romance styles, I don't find those apply so well. Like the idea of aggressor and victim and caregiver and infantile, I also find that the names are atrocious. Okay. Now, what Santo said, more of extensions of new models without first validating them, or focusing on new models without focusing on spreading socionics influence. Well, yes, I think that's the thing. It's counterproductive to have Model G. If you want socionics to become a thing, you need to focus on its most canonical model and push that. You need people to understand and recognize that model first, rather than being caught in an infighting on terms of which model we use. Let's use the one which is canonical, the one which has, well, at least to most people, makes the most sense. Get that known, get that established to some degree, get some scientific backing for it, and that's how you move forward. When it comes to introducing Model G, it's reinventing the wheel at perhaps the worst time. When is your Socionics book out for release? My Socionics book, I started writing years ago, and I haven't really added much to it for years. I think it is something I would like to release at some point. maybe after my YouTube series is finished, which will also take a while. I've just got a lot to do. I've got to get my website going as well, which is sort of in the process. Alicia's been very helpful getting the website together, by the way. And you may see something on that in the near future. RetroGamer71 is the... Oh, hang on, where was it? Is a suggestive function a superego? No, it's a super-id. It is valued and weak. Anything which is valued and weak is super-id. No, superego is something which is unvalued and weak. It's, in other words, subdued and weak. RetroGamer, how are appetitive desires considered, like desire for food or sex? Well, that will go into sensation. It's a concrete, real thing. Something which you want, not necessarily a sense of ought or should. But I think there are different approaches to food and sex and other materialistic things. You can eat something because it is expensive, or because it's something which, well, you're demonstrating your conquering of the environment by eating it. Say it's a piece of game which you've hunted, or it's just a luxurious sort of meat. You can only buy it because you've achieved that amount of wealth. I think that'd be more of an extrovert sensation approach. Same thing with sex. If your sex is very sort of vigorous and aggressive, it may suggest a degree of extrovert sensation. If it comes into ideas of dominance, for instance. Whereas if the focus is more on the quality of the food, where it's not about status or it's not about power, it's about just it tasting nice, being more comforting and enjoyable. That's more of an introverted sensation approach to food. And I think the same thing with sex. If sex is, I guess, more, less intense, I guess. Well, even then, I'm not sure. I can't really say much about sex, and I scratch that. But about food, certainly. Focus on sort of the comfort and enjoyment of the food, or is it more focused on the status which the food implies? I think that all goes under the former extrovert sensation. Former introvert sensation, latter introverted sensation. Alicia Harris, do you think it is possible to type children? Or do you think type isn't fully established until teens or early adulthood? I think you can type children. I think, at least myself, the psychologist reported me at 3 years old would have been enough to put me in the category of ILE as a most likely type for me. I think you can type children, young children. Can you type an infant? Less likely. I think 3 to 4, I think you can start getting an idea of someone's type if you know what to look for. I think that, I think you can type children, but you have to be careful about it. You need to know what you're doing. You're deprived of certain means through which you could type an adult, but at the same time you're given certain other abilities. For instance, yes, a child you can't talk with as much, you can't discuss their views as much if they're very young. They aren't able to articulate themselves. But at the same time, and such a type is less likely to be able to deceive or have a projected image which is different to how they actually are. There's more of an honesty to a child in that respect. So you can pick things out quite quickly. There's less that is learned, there are fewer coping mechanisms, and more of a raw, unadulterated type. Retrogamer, normativity weak function. Yes, if you are limited to the normativity and cannot generalize from normativity to other situations, if you can't move from the normative to other situations, if you can't find out the situation where those rules no longer apply to the situation, that I think is a definition of a weak function. So Creambee says, by self-dualize, I meant increasing the mere accessibility of a weaker but valued information metabolism elements, not the maximization of their strengths. I think that's should be quite possible. You place yourself in environments where you're able to engage with information metabolism elements more, or superid more. I think that makes sense. Let's say a Lee who, regularly has to cook, regularly has to entertain. That's going to, contribute to their self-development in a positive way, I would say. So yeah, I think so. If you put the bar in that lower level, I think it is plausible. Right. Any more questions? Not yet. I think it's time for me to stop now. I think it's a good time to stop. It's been an hour. Okay, I'll take one last question. If anyone has any extra questions. See if I've missed anything. No, I don't think I've missed anything here. Oh, Shadowblade has a question. Why do you have ligma? I don't know what a ligma is. Not sure what a ligma is. No, I don't know. Okay, thank you everyone. Alright, I'll stop the broadcast. Oh, it's a meme. Funny. I'll look that up later. Thanks for that one. Alright everyone, speak soon and have a happy new year.